Welcome everybody to our January Happiness Hour. These are our monthly events with members of the Goodness Exchange, and each month we introduce you to someone incredible person that is working to make the world a better place, and have you get to know them a little bit better. We love these events because they feel like we're just kind of welcoming everybody into the Goodness Exchange family, and I think that's such a wonderful thing for us to do. So our conversation, as usual, is going to last with our guests for 25 to 30 minutes, and then we'll open up the floor to questions, and you can either throw those in the chat and then I can kind of call people up afterward, or we can do the raise your hand thing on Zoom. Either way works. But this afternoon or morning or evening, wherever you're located, we're so lucky to have Mark Redmond join us. Mark has been working in the field of caring for homeless and at-risk youth for over 40 years. He is presently the executive director of Spectrum Youth and Family Services in Burlington, Vermont, which is an incredible organization that I have known about as a Vermonter my entire life. It has done incredible work. He's also published columns in numerous publications, including Forbes, the New York Times, the Washington Post, and Huffington Post. He's also a remarkable storyteller, which I'm sure we're going to get into today. He's had work published on The Moth. He also has two one-person shows that have shown on Broadway and at the Flynn Space in Burlington, Vermont. And he's the author of two books, including The Goodness Within, Reaching Out to Troubled Teens with Love and Compassion, and Called, a memoir. It is my honor, both as a Vermonter and a person who believes that goodness is happening in the world, to welcome you here, Mark, for this discussion and to talk about how one small act can have a positive impact on people's lives. So, Mark, welcome. We're so excited.
Thank you. What a lovely introduction. Thank you so much. That was wonderful. Thank you.
Yeah.
Happy holidays,
yes. Well,
and happy 2022.
Yes. Mark, I have to just say on a personal note, your work with Spectrum Youth Family Services as a lifelong Vermonter, that is an organization that I think everyone knows about in Vermont. And I want to thank you for working so hard in service of kids that really need your help. And it's just incredible what you've done to bring this to Vermont. And like I said, it's something I've known about it's one of those organizations that's just so ever present in our lives in Vermont. And I thank you for making that something that is on everyone's radar screen in Vermont. I think it's so critical.
You're very welcome, and thanks for saying that. I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Yeah, it is really important. So I want to start off, whenever I meet somebody who has worked so long and so passionately in a field, I always wonder, how did they get started? So I'll just ask you straight up, how did you get started in this world of caring for at-risk and homeless youth?
That's a good question. I'm not supposed to be doing this. I was a business major in college. My dad was a commercial real estate developer. All my brothers, worked on Wall Street. They're all retired now, even though they're younger than me, because they made so much money. And actually, that's how I started. I had a job on Madison Avenue and a studio apartment, with a barbecue on the Upper East Side and all that, and all the suits and everything. And I started volunteering. A friend of mine in college, who I knew from college, had gone in a different direction. She was working with homeless teens at this place called Covenant House in Times Square with a lot of runaway and homeless kids. And she said, we could use some volunteer help. So I thought, well, I'll go over there one night a week and hand out brownies and play basketball, and I would do that. And Times Square now is like Disney, Hard Rock Cafe. It was not like that in 1981. It was really a very scary, dangerous place, violence, prostitution, pornography. It was terrible. And that's where kids were hanging out. So I would go there and do that once a week. And I began to realize I really began to look forward to going. It wasn't like a chore or something to do, to get off my guilty conscience. I really enjoyed being around those kids. And they had a program there where you could actually not only be a part-time volunteer, but be a full-time volunteer for 1 year and live there and get $12 a week. That was your pay. So I heard about that. And then, it was a gradual thing. I was lucky. My parents paid for my college. I didn't have any loans or anything like that, So I had a lot of financial independence. And then I remember going to this meeting. I was in this management training program. There were like 10 of us. We were going to be the future presidents and vice presidents for this $1 trillion corporation. And I remember being in this meeting with this senior vice president. And he said, our assets now are at, I don't know what, it's 300 billion. And the goal is to get to 500 billion by the end of the decade. You know, and that's what you'll have to work toward. That's the goal. That's what you have to dedicate yourself to. And I remember sitting here thinking, that's not what I want to dedicate my life to. You know, I'm not saying it's wrong. I'm not saying it's immoral, or I'm not saying that. I'm just saying that's not what I want to dedicate myself to. I really don't. So I quit. My parents were upset. My friends thought I was crazy. All my college friends couldn't believe it. And I quit my job and I gave my car to my brother. I gave up the nice apartment. I gave all the suits away. And then I moved into not even an apartment, like a room across from a crack house and a strip club, and just started working with homeless teenagers. So that's the origin. You know, a Batman has an origin story. That's my origin story. There you
Honestly, equal to Batman in every single way.
I don't know.
I love it. One of the things that just strikes me, because I know where we're headed in part of this conversation. One of the things that really strikes me is you have this. I mean, that takes courage. I don't know, like, how old were you when you decided? And
I was 23.
That takes so much courage. And I wonder, and I know that you've done other things in your life, like reach out to people none of us would ever reach out to. And I think I'll leave that open. That's one of Bryson's favorite stories about you. But where do you think that courage comes from? Where do you get that courage?
Or
do you even look at it as courage?
I'm a pretty religious person. You know, I tell people that, although it's funny, people read my book, they're like, we didn't know you were that religious. And I'm like, I said, yeah, St. Francis supposedly said to his Franciscans, go and preach the gospel, use words only if necessary. So I said, to me, if you're going to be religious, it's about how you live your life, not speaking, you know, and preach. So that has given me, I think, a lot of courage to have a strong faith like that. And then, you know, my parents were great role models. They're both still alive at 91. My dad has dementia, so he's not in great shape. But, you know, he grew up poor, no dad, 5 kids, the Depression, working on the railroad at age 15, you know, going to college at night when I was a baby. And they instilled a strong work ethic in us and always encouraged us, you know, try out for that team, see if you can get into that college, you know. So there was a lot. I kind of grew up in that culture of people, of adults giving you confidence. And frankly, that's what I think I and my coworkers try and do now. Because, you know, we see kids at Spectrum who are 17, 18, who didn't grow up in families like that. Didn't grow up in where there were parents encouraging them to do things, you know? So I would say that those two things, faith and also being having role models around me, always encouraging me. Those two things really give me the courage.
I love that. So I think it's a good segue. Could you tell us a little bit more about what Spectrum does so that people can understand? I mean, I do, because I grew up kind of steeped in it, but tell us here, because it's incredible. It's really incredible.
So Spectrum, we started 52 years ago, you know, so it's been around for a while. I got here 19 years ago. And, you know, I tell people we work with kids as young as 13 or 14, all the way up to like 22, 23. And kids are really struggling, you know, kids who have been in and out of foster care, in and out of the children's mental health system, dropped out of high school, no job skills, suffering from addiction issues, suffering from mental health issues, in the criminal justice, kids involved in human trafficking. And I always tell, and a combination of those, you know, so it's rare to have a child who's just a runaway. It's a runaway who also suffers from addiction, who's been involved in human trafficking, you know, or it's a kid who's been in and out of foster care and also dropped out of high school and has some criminal charge, you know, so it's a mix of all those things. Most of our kids come from extreme poverty, extreme family dysfunction, you know, mom's in prison or dad's missing or mom's suffering from it or mom overdosed, you know, we hear those stories a million times. But then again, we do mental health and addiction counseling, and I'll tell you, some of the wealthiest families from Vermont come knocking on our door. There's a family that donates $250,000 to us every year because 18 years ago, their daughter was addicted to drugs and she's a kindergarten teacher now, and they're grateful to us. So I wrote a column for the Washington Post once that was like, addiction and mental health can strike any family, I don't care, right? It's not just poor people who suffer from these things. This could be any family. And you can be a family where you have 4 children and 3 are all headed down the right path. and one goes like this, you know, and you raise them all the same way in the same family. So we do see all demographics, but I would say, especially when it comes to homeless youth, it's mostly low income, extreme family, multi-generational family dysfunction.
And so as a part of, you're providing the services, and then I know that some of this, the kids that work with you, you have housing for them, or is that, how does that process
So
work?
I should talk about that.
How do kids find you? Yeah.
We have a drop-in center, and we have just opened another one in St. Albans. You know, it's like low barrier, meaning you can come in and we don't need your social security number. We don't need your Medicaid number. We'd like to know your name, but come on in, get a free hot lunch, free hot dinner, tons of donated clothes, free boots in the winter, you know, and so that's like one main point, you know, you use all laundry facilities, you know, use the computers, but then if you're literally homeless, we have 16 beds upstairs and you can live there. And then we opened up in the winter for a couple of years ago, we realized we were always full in the winter. And you know, Bryce lives in Massachusetts. It gets freezing cold here in the winter. And we were turning kids away. So I went to a local church and asked the bishop if we could use their church basement. So now we have 10, in the winter, we have 10 more beds. So, and I was there, I did the 3 a.m. shift 2 days ago because we're having trouble finding staff. And there were 6 kids in there, you know? So anyway, we do that. And then we have licensed mental health and addiction counselors on staff. We have staff who will help kids find jobs. You know, we do mentoring. We have about 60 mentors who mentor kids. And then the thing, we were on CBS News a month ago, the Net with Gail King. We started our own business. We started our own for-profit business about 4 years ago because we realized our kids are pretty good at finding jobs. They're terrible at keeping jobs. So, and when I asked our staff, why do these kids quit or get fired so quickly from their restaurant or the construction? They said, well, they don't know how to show up on time. They don't know how to call out sick. They don't know how to speak to a boss. They don't know how to work as part of a team because they didn't grow up in families where this was modeled. So I said, well, if you kids who are doing well, what's in the secret sauce? They said, a boss who gets who these kids are and how to handle them. But most bosses, they're trying to run their restaurant or their theater. They're not trained in this. So that's when we're like, well, we are trained in this. This is what we do. Why don't we start a business, you know, and work? So we did. We started a car detailing business and it's going great. We track how long they stay in jobs and we've more than doubled the longevity rate. So anyway, I had a connection to CBS and I watch CBS News every night and it's 28 minutes of insurrection, fires, flooding, you know, like 2 minutes of some woman who's knitting sweaters for dogs or something. So I said, my God, I got this car detailing thing with taking a homeless kid. So anyway, they came up and did a whole piece on it, which was great.
Oh, I love it. Congratulations.
Yeah. So that's Spectrum. That's, you know, in a nutshell, that we work with. Last year was 974 different youth in the course of a year. So
wow.
Yeah, it's a lot of kids. Yeah.
That's huge. That's huge. And I think, you know, what always struck me particularly is in a small state like Vermont, you know, and I think a lot of people have a perception of a state like Vermont that it's like, you know, kind of all roses and, you know, everybody's taken care of.
It's all Ben and Jerry's. It's all Ben and Jerry's
and cows and I don't know, beautiful hills and I
ice
think,
cream,
you know,
Bernie Sanders, everything.
It's all those things, right? And I think it's so important that, you know, I think this is so exemplary of like a place where like the community has really gotten behind you guys and where I think, you know, what happens when the community really cares about an organization like yours. And I'm, like I said, I know I'm just gushing over you because I think this is like meeting a celebrity. I'll just say that, a Vermont celebrity.
Come on now. Come on now.
That's how big it is.
If anybody's a celebrity, it's Linda. Linda's a celebrity, not me.
But you know, when you were talking about Spectrum, one of the things that stood out to me is that there's so many ways to connect to the work that you're doing. And, you know, our overarching theme today is sort of talking about how like one small act of kindness really matters. And I was wondering if you can get into some of the stories of sort of those one small acts and how important it is to organizations like yours to have people that are willing to be the mentors, willing to volunteer, you know, willing to step into those roles.
Yeah. So, you know, I tell people, people go, oh, how can I help Spectrum? And I'm like, well, of course, you know, you can donate. We love when people donate. That's great. But I said, you know, mentoring is a huge, huge piece of it too, you know? And I'm like, it's 1 hour a week. we're not asking you to leave your job or, it's 1 hour a week. And I just cannot tell you. And we kind of lure them in. We say, oh, it's just 1 year. It's 1 year. It's all we ask is 1 year. But I mean, so many mentors have stuck with these kids for years. I mean, even paid their college education. I mean, it's just incredible the stuff they've done. But it's small stuff. I think I've told you, on a personal level, in 2004, Vermont was accepting refugees from Somalia. There was a terrible war in Somalia, and my wife and I agreed to take in a family. Went to the airport, met a single mom with 5 kids, ages 1, 3, 5, 7, and 9. Met them at the airport, There were little kerchiefs around their neck, USCRI, United States Committee on Refugees International. So they lived with us for a week. The father was supposed to come and he refused to get on the plane in Kenya at the last minute because he had another family. So can you imagine a single mother with 5 kids? You don't know them. So they lived with us for a week. And then as they were going out the door, my wife said, you better find mentors for all 5 of those kids. Because think of this poor mother, doesn't know the language, didn't even know a written language, trying to adjust to no job. Oh my God, this is going to be 5 kids. So she said, see if you can find mentors. So I said, great idea. Why don't we start with you? So my wife became the mentor to Medina, who was 9 years old, And so she would meet with Medina. And I don't want to put it all on my wife, but I mean, Medina now has a bachelor's degree, went on a full scholarship to the University of Vermont. We had her over recently. She lives in Utica, New York, working on her master's degree, The next girl down is a junior at Champlain College, full scholarship, room and board too, on a pre-law program,
Wow.
So,
wow.
So everybody had a mentor though. We got somebody from my church to mentor the next boy down, and then another friend, everybody had a mentor. And the mentors did a lot. And it was a huge help for that mother, a huge help, So they didn't do incredible, fantastic, it was my wife taking Medina to get a winter coat, it was taking her to what's the place? Great Adventure, where all the slides are, it wasn't big stuff. Like I just signed, the mother got remarried. She has another boy now, he's 7. They don't have money. And so I signed him up. I paid $65 so he can play rec basketball in Essex. I mean, that's a little thing, but to that kid,
it's huge.
A little thing. So here in Burlington, right, we got a ton of snow. I'm looking at my window, Bryce. There's a lot of snow in Burlington. Come up to Burlington if you want to ski. So the guy who runs the Church Street Marketplace called me last year. He's like, it was high snow. People can't get to their cars. The maintenance guys do a crappy job. Can I pay your kids to go out with shovels and shovel around the parking meters? So we just went into our drop, homeless kids. Hey, who wants to go shovel? He paid them by the inch, however high the inch thing was. My staff came, they were like, that changed those kids' lives. I was like, come on. They were like, no, you don't know, to go out and to work and to get paid and to have someone say, wow, thanks for doing that. And I get my car out of it, That's huge. It seems so small, and it is so small, but it's not. It's not, right? So you're right. And my book is filled with a lot of stories like that, where you did something that looks small that totally turned somebody's life around,
It's just so incredible. It's just so incredible. And such a great reminder of the way in which we're all so interconnected, and that we can do something that maybe we don't even remember that can have a lasting impact on someone in such a big, important way. Yeah. And I think, one of the things that is brought to mind for me in this, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on this, is sort of like, how do we get more people to want to do those small acts, because we're all capable of them. And it's just like, do you think it's something intrinsic in some of us, like the people that are here that we're like, oh, let's go do this? Or is it, how do we inspire other people to do that? Is it by seeing it?
It's funny. And Linda, I told a story for the Moth, and this story is in the book. Remember, Linda, there was a young man who'd been homeless. We took him in at Spectrum, and he was all doing all right. He left us. He had a job at McDonald's. He had his own apartment, but he was barely scraping by. And so I took him out for lunch, and then I said, he liked fixing cars. I said, why don't we go look at Vermont Tech? They have a car technician pro, you can make a good living being a car mechanic, So he was like, all right, I'll I'll go and take a look. So we went up there, we met the college president, we went to the auto shop and, so then he called, I said, what do you think? He's like, I don't know. I don't want to leave my apartment. I don't want to give up my Section 8. And I know I'm working at McDonald's. I make a minimum wage. So he did call and he said, oh, okay, I think I want to apply, So then I called the head of the university. I was like, all right, he's going to apply. Can you get him a scholarship? Yes. Then he's going to need a place to live. Can you get him a dorm? Yes. Can you get him a job on campus? Yes. So we got all that lined up. Then he needed tools. You have to buy your own tools. I called the donor at Spectrum. Can you pay for the tools? Yes. Then we got to get him down there. Well, a mentor for us has a big truck. I was like, hey, what are you doing next Saturday? Can you? Then he needed an internship. So I know these women who run Burlington. So I told the story to them often. I was like, the moral of the story is people want to help. They just don't know how to help, But if you're able to say, hey, can you do this? And you're good at that, and you can do this, people 99% of the time are like, yes, they'll do. They just need to be asked,
Oh, I love that.
And really play to their strengths. So I don't know. I think of that all the time. That's just one little example. People want to help. They don't know how to help,
Oh, that's so incredible. And it's one of those like kind of like, oh, duh, reminders. You know what I mean? It's like, I feel like so often we're like, oh, I don't want to ask for help, or I don't want to ask for help on behalf of X or Y. But I think it's so true.
Hey, here's the PS to that story. And this isn't in the book, Linda.
Yeah.
He graduated, got his associate's degree, then he went back, got his bachelor's degree, and he was named commencement speaker.
Oh, incredible.
I know.
I love it.
I heard from him, he's living in, he got COVID about a month ago, so he's recovering, but I hear from him, he's living with his mom, he's reconciled with his family, which is nice. But anyway, I love that story because it shows, it wasn't me, it was partly me, but it was me asking other people to help out in any way they could,
I love that. I love it. It's such a brilliant reminder. And on the theme of asking, I would be remiss if I didn't have you recount, because it's Bryce's favorite story, the story of you reaching out to Warren Buffett. It's absolutely brilliant. I cannot leave here. Bryce will be very angry at me. He loves this one.
So it's a crazy story. So I had this column in Forbes that was like, it was like a Hail Mary pass. I sent them a column on Contact Us, and they called me the next day and ran a column that I wrote. And my wife's grandfather said, you should have done that column to Warren Buffett. I was like, Warren Buffett must have 9 layers of secretaries to protect him from people like me. But Warren Buffett wrote back to me. He didn't give any money, but he wrote back. And a couple of years later, my wife's same grandfather, he was like 96 by then, oldest living ex-FBI agent. And he worked for J. Edgar Hoover. So he visited Spectrum, and that Christmas he said, you're married to one of my granddaughters. Well, another one is dating Warren Buffett's sister's grandson. So Warren Buffett has a sister has a grandson. So anyway, I called my wife's cousin. I was like, what is granddad talking about? Oh yeah, it's true. I broke up with him, but I'm still friends with Doris Buffett. And she's got a lot of her brother's money. She's got her own foundation. She goes, don't email, don't even type. Handwrite, take a pen with your agency's letterhead and write Doris Buffett a little note, what you need money for. So anyway, she gave us $250,000 to renovate a new residence for homeless teenagers. So anyway, she passed away about 3 years ago, but her foundation now still lives on, and they give us $110,000 every year so we can run that warming shelter I was talking about. She gives us $110,000 so we can operate that warming shelter. So it's great, it's a crazy story. There's a bunch of lessons there, including listen to your 96-year-old grandfather and don't be afraid to reach out. It seemed crazy, didn't it? That anything good would come of that. But I mean, it happens all the time. Like Gandhi said, if you don't ask, you don't get.
Oh my God, I love that. Well, I want to encourage everybody to throw their questions in the chat or raise their hand if they have any. If there's not any off the top of our head, I can steal the floor and ask one more to you, Mark.
Sure.
If anybody wants to go right ahead, but I'll jump in here.
Martine.
Yeah. Okay. Go ahead. Yeah.
Hi, Mark. Loved loved hearing about this whole thing. The pandemic, how has that affected the work that you're trying to do? I know we've had a hard time down here on the Cape. We used to be able to serve people indoors and have a lot more interaction, play games, and now it's window service. We still have people coming, but it's a lot harder. I volunteer and Bryce has joined me a couple of times now too, at a family. It's a church down in Hyannis, and we serve meals every single night.
Wow, God bless you. That's great.
So
yeah, it's right. It's been super hard. I mean, every time we think we're out of this thing, it sneaks back on us. So when it all came down to March of 2020, right? Yeah, almost 2 years ago. And we didn't know how it was transmitted, right? Remember, we were washing our vegetables and don't touch your face, and right? Nobody. So we just, man, it went from like, this is something to be concerned about. Like 2 days later, like, holy smokes, like everybody needs to go remote. Everybody's got a laptop. We'll do counseling over Zoom. But, you know, the kids in our drop-in center and the kids who live with us, we didn't have that luxury, you know? So we masked up, we used precautions, we made it through. I paid staff hazard pay. I said to staff, if any of you are too afraid to come in, don't come in and we'll still pay you and we won't even make you take a health day. You know, this is not your fault, you know? But if you do show up, we'll pay you time and a half. So people were great. We had some staff who got COVID, but they might have gotten it at home or with their, who knows? So anyway, now we got the Omicron, right? So, I mean, this is like a daily discussion. Do we go to hazard pay again? How do we keep ourselves safe? Our kids are not great with the masking and getting vaccinated, you know, so we have not, we're still, I cooked dinner on our drop-in 2 nights ago. We're still doing that. We're still keeping our warming shut, you know, but I'm just hoping this latest thing, but it's been hard. I'm sure it's hard at your place, you know.
now, what do you have in Vermont for health services for these people?
Thank goodness, right in our drop-in center is a health clinic, the local, what's called federally qualified health center. They're across town, but they open up a satellite clinic right in our building. So it's free healthcare, right? Doctors, nurses, physicians assistant, psychiatric, that is, I mean, people come to see Spectrum who work in our field and they're stunned. They're like, nobody has that. Nobody has a health clinic right in their drop-in center, you know? So that's really, really fortunate. But, you know, we had tests for kids, you know, but we're scrambling. So it's been really hard, really hard. And people are tired. More than discouraged, people are tired, you know? And my #1 job is not to get tired. I think Linda's got a hand up too.
Your #1 job is not to get tired.
It's true. Or discouraged, right? It's
tired
true.
or discouraged. I love that. I love that.
That's true.
So, you know, sometimes I think that you can think differently, but like, help me improve my way of thinking on this. Sometimes I see that the reason why people don't get involved is because we've got this mentality that the problem is too big. It's just too big, and then we think that if we can't make a touchdown for someone, well, you and I, in our interview, I've interviewed Mark twice, so I'd highly recommend you go to the Conspiracy of Goodness podcast and listen to both those episodes. We laughed so hard my face hurt. I mean, this is Mark's light, is that we can talk about a subject as heavy and as important as homeless teenagers, and both smile through the whole thing. So much my face hurt that day. But anyway, we used a football analogy, and I see that a lot of times people are stopped in their tracks from starting with an organization like yours, even if it's something small, because they feel like they can't get involved because they can't help anybody make a touchdown.
Yeah, right.
And you know, most of us know life is a game of inches. So
right, it's true. Right.
Help us understand that whole.
Yeah, I mean, you know, I tell people, yeah, the odds are stacked against a lot of these kids. You know, they just are. By the time we get them at 17 or 18, they've endured terrible trauma. You know, they've been bounced around from home to home to home to couch, you know. But so what? I mean, we got to start. We have to start somewhere, you know? And so we're going to take them in. You can help. You want to do something? Great. You can cook a meal. These kids love it when someone comes in. I cook breakfast once a month for the kids who live, you know, I get up early and they meet me at the door. They're so happy. You know, what are you making? You making waffles again? You know, I mean, little things like that. But but it's incremental. But if we keep doing that, if we keep pressing ahead, right? So I've just seen so many stories, like the young man who was, you know, graduated from Vermont. I mean, you know, that wasn't all me, but it was little, and there was setbacks. He got in a fist fight when he was an RA, and he lost his. I mean, there are a lot of times I was like, you know. So, but you have to keep pressing forward. So you're right. You don't want to. Sometimes you win a football game by throwing a 99-yard pass, right? But a lot of times you win it because you just grind it out down the field.
Just grind it out. And you know, that's the great thing about your stories, Mark. You have so many stories of those small wins.
Yeah, right.
Remember the story? Tell the story about how, didn't you take a bunch of kids to Denny's or Applebee's or something once? And
oh my God, I was running the residential program for teenagers in Doxford, New York. This suicidal girl was terrible. 8 in the morning, runs out of her cottage, runs down towards the Amtrak tracks. It's like 0 degrees out. I think I'm in my pajamas, my sweats, and I'm dodging the trains. I'm afraid she's jumped in the Hudson River. I can't find her. And before I went down, I yelled to one of the staff, I'll try and get you help. And I was like, I don't know what that means. And like 10 minutes later, I look around and I see these 12, 14-year-old boys, like the cavalry, coming down this hill, and they found her. They found the girl, you know, not me. So that night I was like, I can do something for those kids. So I just called. You're right. It was like an Applebee's type place. I was like, hey, you know, table for 15, you know, and I made these little hero certificates. So we pull into the restaurant and there's a table there. And one of these kids says, is that for us? Is that for us? And I was like, yeah, that's for us. You know, I reserved a table. So then we sit down and another kid goes, what's the limit, Mr. Redmond? I said, what do you mean, what's the limit? Because again, they'd grown up and instant, you know, how much can we spend for our meal? I said, get what you want. Get, you know, it was an Applebee's, right? So the most expensive thing in 1990 was like, so anyway, it's so funny. The waitresses start showing up and they're putting like 2 plates and 2 dinners in front of each kid. I mean, what the, because if you go to McDonald's, what do you do? And you're a teenager, you order 2 hamburgers. That's what they were doing. So there were all these double orders. It was so funny. So finally one kid says, you know, can we get dessert? I'm like, yeah, get whatever you want. It's like, this is the Super Bowl of eating. I mean, it was so, they talked about that for months, going to, you know, it was like we had gone, you know, to the moon. It was the funniest thing. So again, it was a small thing and it was a nice way to reward people who really helped somebody else when they didn't have to, you know? And then there's the skiing trip. When I took the kids skiing, oh my God. One of my workers says, oh, my parents have a ski house up near Syracuse, you know, let's take these kids. So I was a little dubious. So I was like, all right. So there were like 4, I have the picture here, my 5 kids, boy, 14. None of them had ever skied before, you know, all the kids. So my son was with me, so I had cash. So I said to the worker, look, here's a couple $100. This should pay for lift tickets for today, tomorrow. So the guy calls me an hour later. I'm like, how's it going, man? He on the slopes? He goes, well, I took him to a ski shop. They said they needed some stuff, and I really wasn't watching them. And they bought like Hestra gloves. The guy, they're like all the money's gone. There's no money left for skiing. So anyway, I was so pissed. I was like, you gotta watch these kids. Oh my God, you know? So I gave my credit card number. So the kids come home that night and they were like, we can't wait to go back skiing tomorrow, Mr. Redmond. I'm like, we are not going skiing. And one kid, a fancy hat, like, look, you spent all the money on this crap, you know, we don't have no money to ski. So anyway, that night we're watching Saturday Night Live. I'll never forget watching Saturday Night Live. And the commercial comes on, and this boy did not even direct it at me. He wasn't being manipulative. He turns to one of his peers and he goes, you know, today was the most fun I ever had. So I turned around and I said, you mean since you've been at our program, right? You've been at St. Christopher's for like a year. That's the most fun you've had in the last year. He goes, no, in my life. That's the most fun I ever had in my whole life. So I went into the 2 adults. I was like, hey, set your alarms. We're going skiing tomorrow. He's like, I thought you said. I was like, if one of those kids, that was the most fun he ever had in his whole life, we're going back. So anyway, we went back. But again, right? People ski, I ski all the time. My son's growing up. Oh yeah, it's fun. But like, I would never say it's the most fun I ever had in my life. But for these kids to go skiing, then I went with them next day. It was scary as hell. These kids did not know how to ski. And then 2 of them got mad at each other and taking the poles and hitting each other with the poles. Oh God. But anyway, it's another example. What's skiing? Skiing is a small thing, right? For you and I, oh, it's a nice thing. But like to people like these kids, it was the greatest thing ever, you know?
Oh, I adore, those are such good. I love those stories so much. Those are so, it's like, you know, I think one of the best things about this, and I think this is something that I find universal whenever we talk to people that are like, I don't know, we say they're solving the world's big problems, right? It's like everyone is so full of joy and your face hurts afterward from smiling. And it's like, I feel so lucky to have people around like you, like the people that are a part of this community that like, you can talk about like difficult things. And at the same time, like Linda said, be smiling the whole time and be joyful and, you know, keeping up the energy. And I think that's just an incredible thing that I've noticed about the people that are doing good work in the world. And I'm so glad that everyone gets to.
Well, thanks today, but I should say
today.
too, Linda's read the book.
Yeah.
It's not going to be all happy endings in this kind of work,
Yeah.
right? I mean, I had a staff member get killed, right? Stabbed to death, right, by a kid who was high on drugs.
Right.
You know, there's a young man I wrote about who killed himself. You know, I mean,
Right.
there are kids I know who are still in jail. Kids who are, you know, so it's but although it's even when you have tragedies like that, I think there's a way to frame it or see something good that happened, you know, like even like that young man who killed himself, like there is a picture of him here in my building. I'm the only one who's been here long enough to know who he was, but like one of his neighbors called me after the funeral and said, that boy did not grow up in a loving family. If he was loved by anybody, it was by you people, which made me feel good. You know, like he had a tragic ending in a very sad life, but for a brief period, he knew he was loved by the people here, you know, so I take a lot of solace in that. So you know, it's not going to be all.
No, it's not going to be all roses, but I think
it wouldn't be real. It wouldn't be real.
Right. No, it wouldn't. And I think the important part there is that like, but we can still find the hope in that tragedy. And we can still find, like you said, the idea that, you know, for a brief moment, someone felt loved because of our presence, or a brief moment, someone felt seen because of what we did. That just has just an immeasurable effect on someone, just to know that they were just, even in our own lives, just to know that we were seen or heard or loved is just so, and sometimes by strangers, it's even more beautiful, by people that wouldn't have any connect to us. It makes it even more special and wonderful and more meaningful when someone who by birth or blood is not doesn't need to love you.
That's true.
It's so amazing.
Yeah. I think Linda's got her hand up.
Oh yeah, Mom. Yeah, go right ahead.
Well, one of the things that I'm always reminded of when I listen to Mark's stories, the tragedy and the joy, is that there's this great thought leader. If you look up a TED Talk by Brother David Stendal Raston.
Oh yeah, and gratefulness. Yeah.
Yes. He says this thing: we can't always be happy, but in almost every situation, there's something we can be grateful for.
That's true.
And that's what you always remind me, is that no, not all the stories have a happy ending, but almost all of them, at least all that I know, there's something to be grateful for there. And that maybe we should run around and if we're going to try and be impactful in some even small way with big problems like you are, you got to find this perspective of accepting the not happiness and knowing that there's gratitude there in the mix somewhere, and live on that.
Right. You're right. I think you're right.
be grateful for all these donors that you said, I called up this one and they said, sure. And I called up that one and they said, sure. Like, yeah, the end of that journey for that particular person maybe may end up tragic or what have you.
Right,
And you said there were some major bumps in the road, but there's so much to be grateful for in that story.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Mhm. Mhm.
Yeah, there's a lot to be grateful for. I think the other thing I do, and there's a chapter in the book on this too. We serve youth, but then we're in a position to realize there are laws and systemic things that work against our kids, you know? So like I give the example in that book, like when they interviewed me here, they said, oh, we got to get these kids ready by 18. I was like, what do you mean ready by 18? Oh, foster care ends at 18 in Vermont. So if you're in a foster home or group home on your 18th birthday, you have to leave. And I was like, it's 23 in Connecticut. It's 22 in New York. My own son is 17. He's an honor student at a Jesuit high school. If I said to him on his 18th birthday, happy birthday, now you need to leave my house and support yourself, I don't think he'd make it. So I said, I hope you hire me for the job, but even if you don't, that needs to change. Well, they did hire me. And it took me 4 years, and really buttonholing every legislator, driving around, it was a big, and we changed the law. There's a picture in my office of the governor signing the law in our drop-in center, and that law, changing that law has helped thousands of young people. 18 is just another birthday. You don't have to leave your foster parents now, but that's just one thing. And we talk all the time, what are the systemic things that we see that need to change so our kids can have a better chance, you know what I mean? So I see that as our role, not only providing services to youth, but advocating. They don't have I think we can get better at teaching kids. There's a program in Lowell, Massachusetts called From the Streets to the State House, where they take street kids and teach them how to go into the legislature and advocate what a bill is. So I'm thinking we should do that too. That's more effective than me going, So I think we need to do both. I think we need to be grateful for what we've got, but we also need to advocate for the systemic changes that are needed so we can have a more just, or what's the Martin Luther King, the brotherhood society, a society of brotherhood and sisterhood. That's what we need to be. The beloved community. That was that's what we need to aim for, I mean, ultimately, it's funny. I don't want to say, your goal should be to work so that there's no need for spectrum. And I'm like, listen, there's always going to be a need for spectrum. I'd like to do things so there's less kids who need our help, sure. But there's always going to be kids who suffer from addiction or kids who end up in, I'd be completely naive to think, But I think we can do systemic change and advocate so that kids are helped.
I love that. On that topic, I hear that a lot. And my question is always like, how can I be helpful in that field of things? Like, I know that I can go be a mentor and I know all these things, but then I know that like these systemic problems are there. How does like one of us, and maybe this is just like me being my own biggest kind of goofball here, how do we do that? How do we make sure that we are able to advocate, or how do we help in that way?
That's a really good question. I think places like mine need to get better when we realize what the issue is to say to supporters like you, hey, there's a bill, say the foster care thing. We're proposing a bill that will raise the age of foster care from 18 to 22. Can you call your legislator and tell them you're in favor? You know what I mean? Like, believe me, my wife used to be a legislator. They pay attention to those things.
Really? Okay, that's good to know.
They do, So if you have a lot of constituents saying, hey, this is crazy that we're discharging these kids. We do the same thing in the mental health. This is not just Vermont. We see kids all the time. I saw a couple in our warming shelter the other morning who suffer from serious mental illness. They were in the children's mental health system and got pretty good care. But now they turn 18. Oh, you don't have the right diagnosis. Oh, your IQ is a little too high. You're out of the, you're on the streets, Oh, wow. So that's like one of the things I want to focus on next, like, how do we provide? I did testify about a month ago to a legislative committee. I said, we did great work in 2007, helping foster youth But how about the kids who are in the mental health system, who are ending up in the streets and then ending up in prison cells? Because that's frequently, you can go to our prisons in America today. That's where the people are who are in the mental health system. That's a systemic thing. But I mean, I would need to like do a campaign where I'm reaching out to people like you and saying, hey, here's what we're trying to change. Here's the bill. Here's where it's at. Here's who I need you to contact. And we're not at that stage yet, but hopefully we will be.
Yeah, I always feel like whenever I do that, I feel like I need to have like some like concise argument or some like smart thing.
We should
like
give you the talking point.
It's like
I think Martine's got it.
Yeah. Oh, sorry, Martine, go ahead. Yeah.
So this has been a problem that's been going on for such a long time too, mental health, and it's really been skirted and shoved under the carpet and all of that. I actually, when I was graduating and when I was interning at state facilities. And in those state facilities, you had not only the persons who were diagnosed from birth as mentally disabled by clear-cut, definite things that you could see, but you had a whole population that was actually institutionally retarded, was the terminology used. This is dating myself. I may be a bit older, but some of us.
70s, yeah.
And these are people who today would not have, it was a homeless situation. These were kids who were growing out of foster systems and put in these institutions, no education, not proper staffing type of thing. And they never achieved a greater, their mentors or their peers were people with severe disabilities.
Right.
And it was shocking. And then it was a great thing to say, okay, we need to get rid of these institutions, but there was never, ever a plan put in place for the next step, except for train tickets.
Right, that's what we did. We said these institutions are terrible, and they were terrible. Mm-hmm. So we needed it, but we said, let's do A and then we'll do B. We did A and we never did B.
So it's time. That's our project, Mark.
I think I see another hand. Jens?
Yeah, well, it's Chuck, actually. That's my son's name. Hi, Mark. I'm Linda's husband, Chuck. So.
Oh, nice to meet you. Yay.
You brought up something that's so true. In the state of Illinois, we grew up, and Lincoln was one of the largest state institutions in Illinois. And my sister, who has disabilities, but my parents were way ahead of the curve, and they never allowed her to have to be put in, and we all took care of that situation. My point is, she went on to college, got a master's degree, and all that, but my point to you is that she and I've talked lengthy, and what you brought to Martine, and what you know is when we deinstitutionalize this, if you look at it, it's directly proportional to when homelessness started.
That's right.
These people were the first people to be, homeless. They were sent back to wherever they were from, or they stayed in the communities they were at, and that's when homelessness started. And that's when we realized then, and what you have absorbed is that byproduct of what is deinstitutionalization. And I think it's something we've not addressed. That was in the 80s, and it's never been addressed. And I think you have addressed it. Your group has addressed it, and has been aware of it. And I think that's the hardest part, is to deal with it. So anyway, I just want, to Martine's point, I wanted to make that's when this really has all started. And there was never, my sister, who that's her job. She worked with people with disabilities and families. And when she, we talked about that at length, but my sister, that's when it started. There was no plan. Yes, we wanted these institutions closed that were horrible, but we didn't have a plan. We had no plan B. So anyway, Mark, I also want to say I'm so thankful for what you've done here in St. Albans. I know the facility now down on Lake Street. I drove by it the other day, and Linda said, I know what you're going to be doing when you retire, Chuck. And I said, what's that? You and Mark are going to connect up. And I said, oh my God, that could be great. And I said, so anyway, I am going to be available down the road. So, but
awesome.
You'll probably not see me. That's probably fine.
We'll go on. We'll go on. Thank you. That's great. We're so happy.
I just want to say thank you, because I know a lot of people in St. Albans have been so appreciative of what's been happening, and we've been trying to get something here for years for teens.
I know.
For years.
I heard that. Yeah. No, it's so great.
Yeah, as soon as
Linda.
you said making breakfast, I was like, oh, that's where Chuck's
Oh.
gonna be. I can see him just. He loves slinging all the eggs,
Slinging
doing
the
all the
hash.
pancakes. That man,
Hey, I make some
He's there.
mean pancakes, man.
is the best.
Is
Yeah,
Linda,
Mom.
Linda ever end up?
Yeah.
Yeah. So as we kind of wrap up here, you know, the cool thing about thought leaders like Mark is that they help us understand the problem better, but they're always looking at some version of possibility that the rest of us can't see. And what I love, Mark, take us out on what can we do next? Like, we're recording this. It's
Yeah.
going to live on the Goodness Exchange website. So somebody may be listening to this a year from now too. The problem will be there, I'm sure. So if there was if you could wave a magic wand and tell us what to do next, what should we go out and do next?
I mean, it depends. You know, there are Spectrum-like organizations all over the country, you know, and I think people need to connect to those organizations, right? You know, or Boys and Girls Club is very similar. In fact, Chuck, that's what I've been saying to Boys and Girls Club in Burlington, you need to be in St. Albans because they're really, because we're kind of functioning as both, you know? So, but wherever there's mentoring organizations, I think people need to find those organizations. It's not that hard to find. Connect with them, ask what help they need. Do they need mentors? Do they need cooks? Do they need volunteers? Do they need people to help raise funds? You know, so that's what I think people, you know, should do. I mean, we have people thankfully all around the country helping Spectrum financially, which is great. But besides, you know, people should look locally also. That's what I think, you know?
Brilliant,
Like Vermont,
brilliant.
stay local, eat local. Isn't that what we say in Vermont?
Eat local, help local.
Buy local,
Eat
drink
local,
local.
drink local, buy local,
We're
help
number
local.
one in craft breweries. Craft breweries, we're number one.
Oh man, you're making me miss Vermont now. Well, Mark, thank you so much for
Thanks for
joining us
having
for
me.
this hour.
Loved it.
And whether you started your morning with us, you're starting your afternoon or ending your evening with us, thank you so much for joining us here at the Goodness Exchange Happiness Hour for January. Mark, I can't wait to continue seeing how Spectrum serves our communities. And I am so excited by this conversation. I hope that we've inspired the people here and future viewers to go out and find ways that they can help. Just ask. That's my biggest takeaway from today. Well, thank you, Mark. Thank you so much, everybody.
Thanks, everyone. It was great. Loved it. Thank you.